Hi, everybody. I'm here today to talk about this story. I won't say I want to talk about it, but I'm definitely going to talk about it because it's really important for the lives of trans people who might find them suddenly upended in the UK from very soon. Because former president and loser to a cabbage, was it cabbage or a lettuce? I think it was a lettuce. Liz's lettuce. Liz Truss has tabled a bill in Parliament essentially to remove trans people from single-sex spaces. So obviously the wording is slightly different from that. It says that it's going to be protecting, safeguarding women-only spaces for biological females. So it will define, for the first time, it will define sex in law as biological sex, which is a nonsense. It sounds logical, but it's not something you can actually do, which is why in UK law we don't have biological sex, we have legal sex. So normally legal sex is determined on the approximate shape and size of your genitals when you're born. A healthcare practitioner will take a look at them and make a determination. Now, as I understand it, they'll usually do it on the length of the phallus, but I'm not 100% sure. That's just what I was told. But I guess it makes as fair a measure as anything else. But obviously that's prone to some errors. You can get sort of intersex people who would be harder to categorize into male or female. And sometimes errors can be made. And so there is a process for updating your legal sex. I think it's the Gender Recognition Act, I think. And so we have legal sex in the UK that accommodates for I guess edge cases and things like that. So there's no, and the reason being because there is no strict definition of what biological sex is, And although for most people it's like for 98% of people that's probably straightforward, or maybe slightly less than that. But for the majority of people, this is a really straightforward issue, and the people have, or at least believe they have, all of their ducks in a row. But for those people where they might have one of a variety of different conditions that will result in them having some cross-sex characteristics, and that might be that they're transgender and have been taking cross-sex hormones, and it might be that they were born with one of a whole bunch of different intersex conditions. They might have anything from genetic mosaicism, where somebody has two different sets of genes, or I guess multiple sets of genes, through to things like complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, or CAIS, where you can be genetically male but phenotypically female. So for all intents and purposes, you're female except for your genetics where you're male, and there's all sorts of different varieties and things that would have to tease apart in those issues in the middle. And so there's no one characteristic that will define somebody as being a member of one sex or other. If yours like the presence of a womb, you'll find people who don't have a womb for making you female, or a lack of it for making you male. You'll find people in each of those categories, and so there's no strict definition, and so we have legal sex. So this would be really, really difficult to implement. But another thing that it does is it blocks puberty blocking hormones, so it will prevent them from being prescribed at all in the UK. Certainly capacity claiming child is the opposite sex, and ban the prescription of puberty blocking hormones to children questioning their sex. So, I mean, this is it's life-saving medication for them. All of the world's largest medical organizations have released statements on this. I mean, we'll have a look at some of them. This is actually, these are UK ones. Let's find some of the UK ones aren't necessarily the largest ones. What's this? The Royal College of Psychiatry. This is the American Academy of Clinical Endocrinologists, I think. Let's just check that for a moment, just to make sure I got the title right. I'm just checking here. clinical endocrinology, I think. Yeah. So, and as I understand it, they're the largest. They're the largest association of their type, and they recommend endocrine patients who are transgender or gender diverse should seek medical professionals with experience of gender affirming hormone treatments for transgender and gender diverse people. They have recommendations for the best ways to treat children, so transgender or gender diverse adolescents with persistent gender identity disorder, blah, blah, blah. And it's based around, as they say, gender affirming care. It's the most recommended form of care in the area. And although Liz Truss says that it will provide protection for children, actually the outcomes that children experience by being blocked these forms of care have been shown to be really, really detrimental. This is the American College of Physicians. Again, I believe they're the largest body of their type in the world. In multiple states, bans would force transgender youth to medically detransition or stop successful gender-affirming treatments. Because that's essentially what's going to happen. If you're banning these treatments, you're going to have children who are being forced to detransition, with patients facing loss of medical care and their families and clinicians under legal threat. Some transgender people and their families who can relocate have fled to states supportive of transgender rights, or are trying to navigate traveling out of state for care. I mean, you'll see this is in relation to similar bans that have come into place in America, and it's no surprise what happens when families experience their children losing their healthcare. They flee, they go other places, and that's exactly what we'll find in the UK. So although she says it provides protection, it really isn't providing any protection, and it's going to be massively damaging for trans children. Let's just have a look at some others. I mean, the rate of detransition, 2.5. So in this study, this is by the American Academy of Pediatrics, so the largest pediatric body in the world, again, as I understand it. These are very large organizations. What did they say? So they're looking at detransitioners. Finally, 2.5% of the children studied were using pronouns associated with their sex at birth and could be categorized as cisgender at the time of the data collection, including one who first retransitioned to live as non-binary. So, I mean, you're talking about 97.5% of the children who are put forward for these types of treatment finding themselves being transgender at the end, and them being blocked off from these treatments it's really damaging for them, just find some this is why all of these organizations like these are the largest ones in the UK. The British Psychological Society recommend psychologists are encouraged to support the self-determination of their clients in the development of their identities, practices, and relationships. Psychologists should be mindful that GSRD identities, that's gender and sexuality and relationship diverse identities, basically LGBT+, so the gender diversity identities and practices are fully valid and should support people towards optimum well-being. Any exploration of a client's identity or practice should be on the understanding that these identities and practices are absolutely as legitimate an outcome as any other. As part of this, psychologists should be mindful to the client's preferred terminology, i.e. support them. Let's have a look at this is the British Medical Association on their supportive approach for transgender people. I'm just looking to see whether I've highlighted anything. Providing inclusive support for the BMA affirms the rights of all transgender and non-binary individuals to access healthcare and live their lives with dignity, including having their identity respected. Doctors should work collaboratively with their trans and non-binary patients as they do with any patient in a respectful, open, and sensitive way. I mean, if you read through the guidance here, you'll understand that that they are supportive of trans people and in gender affirming care. Who else have we got? This is the Royal College of Psychiatrists or Psychiatry. I believe psychiatry, I think. Psychiatrists. The Royal College of Psychiatrists. They are committed to working with people who seek help in the context of gender diversity. It considers interventions that claim to convert transgender and gender diverse people into cisgender people are without scientific foundation and thus both unethical and unacceptable. This is a gender-affirming approach. It concurs with the views of many international professional organizations such as WPATH, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the American Psychological Association, that psychological treatments to suppress or revert gender-diverse behaviors are unscientific and unethical. This is what Liz Truss is proposing, something that the Royal College of Psychiatrists considers, to be unscientific and unethical. So, who else do we have? This is the Royal College of GPs. Staff should ensure they address each service user by appropriate name in written, verbal, and electronic communication, including the use of appointment boards, and in the waiting room, changes made to records should be consistent, and all practice staff should show sensitivity. Patients should be recognized as the gender with which they identify and have the same rights as any other patient. It's important for patients that GP remains actively involved in their care before, during, and post transition, and that includes equity of access to appropriate services. You'll see from the training on their website they also have training to support such care. This is not niche stuff. It is overall. I mean, if you look at the number of different organizations that have issued statements in support of gender affirming care, you'll see there are all of them, as all of the significant and recognized bodies have issued that guidance in approval of gender affirmative care. And so these children are really going to be left vulnerable, as the healthcare that they're on is removed, and it gets worse. So I mean, where is it? So she carries on. She's talking about how there is existing statutory guidance. This is the American Medical Association also voicing their support. Empirical evidence has demonstrated that trans and non-binary gender identities are normal variations of human identity and expression for gender diverse individuals. Standards of care and accepted medically necessary services that affirm gender or treat gender dysphoria may include mental health counseling, blah, 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 blah. Clinical guidelines established by professional and medical organizations for the care of minors promote these supportive interventions based on current evidence, and that enabling young people to explore and live in the gender that they choose. Every major medical association in the United States recognizes the medical necessity of transition-related care for improving the physical and mental health of transgender people. Every major medical association, and this is the American Medical Association? Yeah, American Medical Association, but they're joined by so many others, and the supposed care that Liz Truss is promoting is going to be incredibly damaging. Her bill aims to close legal loopholes she believes are being exploited by gender ideology activists. This is how she refers to anybody who supports gender-affirming care. She's referred to anybody who supports LGBT people as extremists. So, yeah. So essentially, Kemi Badenoch issued draft guidance recently. I wonder whether it's covered in here. Draft guidance recently. It's not in this news article. She has issued draft guidance to schools, saying that children shouldn't be affirmed in their gender and they should be banned from facilities and such, but that may very well be against UK law. So these are the loopholes. The fact it's quite possibly illegal. And certainly it's going to be destructive and amoral. So it's actually, the guidance isn't even enforced because it's draft. So but she's complaining that it's not strong enough. So she'll define it as biological sex, which we've already established doesn't actually exist, thereby ending the absurd and dangerous situation where biological males, self-defining as females, can access girls' and women's toilets and so on, and sports contests. I mean, it will provide protection for vulnerable children and teenagers who will otherwise be led down a path of making body-altering decisions that they will later come to regret. We've already looked at the desistance rates that we saw in those articles. We've seen the number and the size of the medical bodies, the various different specialist associations of psychiatrists, endocrinologists who related to hormone treatments, pediatrics, specialists in children's care, just everybody who looks at the actual data and understands the data recommends the affirmative approach because it is the correct approach given the data. I get that people have made their opinions on this on the basis of how they feel and of the basis of their, in inverted commas, common sense. Yeah, here we go. That phrase is even used here. Look, common sense measures. But what is common sense apart from the things you intuitively know without having to think about something? And quite frankly, if you're being asked to resolve something as complex as the best course of treatments for gender diverse children, and you have to look at things like desistance rates and Tanner stages for development and such, and consider other conditions that can interact, like depressive disorders, because obviously if you're dealing with gender issues, you're probably going to have some kind of negative mental consequences to that. I can imagine that you're going to have some depressive influence from that. So yeah, I mean, if you're asked to be able to solve all of that on the basis of common sense, so without thinking about it, just gut response, then it's not. There are situations where that is not the right thing, and this complex, nuanced discussion is one of them. Okay, let's carry on. So I mean, there seems to be quite a broad alignment along these terms for the Conservatives. And if you look at the effects that this will have, I mean, we've discussed how the major medical organizations are against this, but think about the effects that this is having. We mentioned earlier on about the effect, the observed effect that the American College of Physicians are observing about people having to travel out of state for care and people fleeing to other states to try and make sure that their children still have access to the healthcare that they are certain is keeping them alive. These are parents who've noticed changes in their children that as soon as they were able to socially transition, as soon as they were able to receive the healthcare that they require, that they've become brighter, happier children, and they're thinking about whether they need to either move out of state, move somewhere different, relocate to a different country, or whether they could handle living there and let their child take on the negative effects of the ban. And I think that if you can travel, if you can change countries to help save the mental health of your child, that most parents will do that and will have to do that. We see it in America. There's plenty of stories from across America. I mean, there's many states who've done similar kind of things now. Florida has a bathroom law that's gone into effect. And what does it mean for trans people? So this is Governor Ron DeSantis, who brought in, he's the governor of Florida. He brought in similar laws in Florida, stating that a woman should not be in a locker room and have to worry about someone from the opposite sex being in the room. It's obviously is talking about transgender issues, and so they implement a similar ban. And of course, trans people are fleeing to safer spaces. So it's criminalizing trans people being in the most relevant space, and they're left then with the choice, and this is for adults now as well as the kids. If you're a trans adult in the UK and you are using the facilities and bathrooms that align with your gender, and you're going about your business and people don't know who you are or anything about you, then all of a sudden, if you're being asked as, for example, a trans woman to go into a bathroom. I mean, I'm gonna pick Blair White because she is a famous trans person. Now, if she is going into a bathroom with the girls, she's going to draw little attention. However, if she goes into a bathroom full of guys and has to use the bathroom with guys, everyone's going to know that she's trans, and she's going to be trans in an isolated place with men, and it's really going to be dangerous for her, and she's going to have to move somewhere else. Yeah, she's going to have to try and make an environment for herself where she is safe again. So she's probably going to flee the state. You can understand why, if you're somebody like this, or a trans man, being as I was just talking about them earlier on, let's go for Buck Angel. I hope I've got my safe filters on. I do. So this is Buck Angel. He's had a past career that means that I would anticipate that there'll be some unsuitable images here. But this is Buck Angel. He's a trans guy. This guy was born a woman. He's going to have to use if he's in the UK, and any trans guys like him in the UK will now be using the women's facilities. Tell me how you're going to stop guys from going into the women's toilets when guys like this are required to use them. How this is going to normalize guys going into women's bathrooms. And people say, oh yeah, but if you can decide, who you are and whatever's going on, there's no issue at the moment. There's no issue at the moment, So we've had Brianna Jai recently being stabbed, partly because of her transgender identity. We had another trans girl, as I understand, was stabbed 14 times a few weeks ago. Things are becoming quite dangerous, I think, for trans people in the UK. And I think against this backdrop and the notion that they're going to have to be using these facilities, it's no wonder that people are talking about fleeing like the parents are trying to flee Texas, fleeing like the parents are trying to flee American states to get out of the states who are banning care for their children, to get out of states that are making the adults vulnerable. And that's what this is going to do. Besides being almost unenforceable because there is no legal definition of biology in UK law, it's just going to get loads of people looking over their shoulders at each other, judging each other. It's going to normalize guys going into the women's bathrooms, and it's going to get loads of people looking at other women in the bathroom saying, I don't know, maybe your shoulders are too broad, or you're not looking girly enough. Are you trans? And then we start to get into this sort of policing of women's bodies. And policing of men's bodies. I mean, men are pretty heavy-handed with their policing of each other anyway. in terms of men will police each other to remain masculine, ways that women don't tend to police each other. It's much more acceptable for women to be like that. But you know, the kind of women the kind of people who've suffered in women's bathrooms from this type of thing are gender non-conforming women, much more than trans women, because gender non-conforming women are the kind of women who get challenged because they're looking like a guy because they've got short hair and they're wearing a hoodie and trousers, and they're the kind of people who get challenged in bathrooms. So if you're the kind of woman who likes to have like not long hair, girly, frilly pink dresses, then these are the kind of people who tend to get challenged because of this. So I think it's just an awful idea, and I'm really hoping that it gets torn down, because if it doesn't, there'll be a massive outflow of LGBT people from the UK as they all rush to evacuate the country. Anyway, I have to leave it there.